Okay, so hello everyone, thanks to be here, especially Friday morning. I'm Loïc Poulain, I'm working for the support team in Linaro, and today I'm going to speak about the Video for Zephyr project, which is a tentative to create a generic video API and framework for Zephyr Altos. So today, video is everywhere. It's in our car, it's in security, in camera, set-top box, in medicine, for example, for remote surgery. Yeah, quite everywhere. And most of these devices today are running either a Linux-based distro, like Minimal Linux with a BusyBox and a set of open source or proprietary tool on top in order to achieve the function, or with proprietary RTOS. So the strength of Linux is that it's a free solution. It's now robust, it's really popular, and there is a large set of software. On application side, there are a large set of library, but the Linux stack itself is also complex. You have network, Bluetooth, so everything is here. On the other side, some RTOS solutions are more appropriate for device with constraint in terms of memory footprint, of hardware, of real-time issue. So RTOS are usually more well suited for such kind of microcontroller. So Zephyr, which it's relatively a quite new project, is a scalable real-time open source operating system. It supports multiple hardware architecture, and the way it has been designed is really close to Linux in terms of driver model structure, in terms of device usage, and so on. So for me, it brings the best of the both worlds. Okay. So not long time ago, I had to work on enabling a camera on a microcontroller board. There were nothing on Zephyr at that time, so I decided to create something a bit more generic and try to push that to Zephyr. So the problem is that there is absolutely no existing POSIX API for video or for camera. So I look at what was existing in the software era, mainly on Linux. So for sure I look at V4A2, which is Video for Linux. This is the API between user space on Linux kernel space, and other tool and framework like the popular JStreamer or OpenMax, which can be used, for example, in Android. To create this API, I had also to keep in mind the Zephyr constraint, because we are in real-time context. It's dedicated for relatively small memory footprint. It's for sure need to be scalable, and the API, as any API should be, needs to be hardware agnostic and easy to integrate for other people creating driver or wanting to support their hardware. And for sure, this project is community driven, and there is a large community, so collaborate with the different people of the community. So quick on that, so the API is highly inspired by V4L2. I had a look at other API and I did some missing points that V4L2 didn't have. And I had a lot of discussion with people from various people from the community in order to improve the API. So finally, this API is ongoing. There is a pull request, and I'm going to present you a bit more about the different concept and important element of this API, which are quite common with other video API anyway. So the central element is maybe the video device. So the video device represents a device which achieves video function, so which deal with video. And at the very beginning, I was thinking about implementing a camera driver, but I realized that it can be generalized to any video device. So there are mainly three kinds of video device. There are video source device, like your camera. This kind of video generates a video stream or video data. There are video output device, which can be simple display, analog output, printer, and so on. And there are video processing device that are quite memory-to-memory device, and which deal with consuming and generating data at the same time. So that can be encoder, hardware encoder, decoder, color space converter, and so on. One other important is the video format. This is how the stream of data is laid out into the byte stream. So it can be defined with different elements, like the pixel format. There is a known way to identify the pixel format with what is called the 4cc code. So it can be UV, it can be RGB, but it also can be compressed format like JPEG and so on. It needs to be also identified with the resolution, and we have something called the pitch, which is a kind of padding and which depends on the software generating the data. For example, if we generate the data with some DMA transaction, we may have to add some padding in the video. Yeah, the video buffer now. So the video buffer is the mechanism that allows you to transfer your data. This is a transport mechanism. The video buffer needs to be data format agnostic, the format we see just previously. That means I can transport on this buffer any data in any format. It needs to be DMA-able for devices that capture the data stream via DMA or other transaction. The buffer needs to be aligned in a way that allows this kind of transaction. And in a memory area where it's allowed for the device to write the buffer. It needs to be timestampable. I mean, we need to be able to add a timestamp to the buffer, either when the timestamp is captured or either when we want to display it or to transfer it. That allows time for rendering, synchronization with other stream, and drift calculation. And this buffer needs to be understandable by any generic video device, so we can transfer it between the device. The video buffer pool, this is basically just a standard memory pool, but dedicated for video. So this is defined at build time, and at runtime when an application needs one or more video buffer, it can use this dedicated pool to get the buffers. So this is just a pool of video buffers. The video endpoint now. So each video device has one or more video endpoints. This endpoint can be used to enqueue or dequeue video buffer. And once the primary video function is down, the video buffer can be dequeued from the endpoint. There are mainly two kinds of endpoints. There is output endpoint and input endpoint. So yeah, on the right here, you can see two different endpoints. This one is output endpoint. We enqueue a video buffer, which is then processed by the video device in hardware and software via GMA, via SPI, whatever. The function is accomplished. So for an output endpoint, the video device read the buffer and do something with it. And when it's done, the buffer is pushed back to the output queue. And then at that point, user can get the buffer. That's the same for the input endpoint, but on the opposite, the buffer is consumed. Sorry, I think I have an error in my out and in, but that's the concept. Either the buffer is consumed or filled, and then DQ and Q and DQ. Yeah, so now we have the basic element. We have a way to access the device, to push video buffer for the data path. So now we need a way to control the device. So at the very beginning, I was thinking about adding function, like for setting exposure, frame rate, gain, but it's not scalable at all. That means the API will be not scalable with such interface, because if someone wants to add its own feature for this camera, it will just add several and a lot of new function. So I decided to go with control, with only two functions, which is get and set control, and define some control ID, CID. And each CID can be either video generic, like horizontal, vertical flip, frame rate, and so on. You can have class-specific control, like the one for camera. So you have control camera, exposure, etc. Or device vendor specific. If vendor have specific feature in their camera, they can just implement a control, like for example some low power mode or something that's only that device support. They can use that. So the value, the format of the value depends mainly on the control ID you select. So it allows to have a scalable API, but a very stable one, since you don't have to modify the function, and each driver can implement or not the control it wants. So at the end, this is the API we have. So we have the set and get format, which allow you to configure and get the format of video endpoint, stream start and stop, which is here to start and stop the main video function, either capture or outputting. Get capabilities, this is more to enumerate the device endpoint and the capabilities of this endpoint, which resolution is supported, which format, and so on. We have onQ and DQ function. So onQ push the buffer in the endpoint queue, and DQ wait for any buffer to be done by the main function. So when a buffer is ready, it will retrieve back by the DQ function. So DQ is a sleeping function, blocking function. Sorry. We just see the set and get control function, and I also did a set signal function. This is something that had been asked by some people of the community. That allows to register a signal to the camera video subsystem, and once a buffer once a buffer is done, an event is generated. That's allowed to pull several video devices without having to create multiple threads to wait on the different device. So for reducing mainly the memory footprint. So here is a very basic example of capturing a video buffer, and this is quite the minimal sequence. So we start by allocating a buffer to the video buffer pool. We retrieve the buffer. Then we set the format of the video device. Usually video device needs to have a default format. So these steps can be optional if the default format is good for you. Then you can start the video function, and after that the video function is running, and you can onQ some video buffer, so the video buffer you allocated before. once you uncue the buffer, the hardware starts the function, and for example, if it's a camera, it starts to fill your video buffer. Then you can call the dequeue function. The dequeue function will just wait for buffer availability, and when the hardware has done, an event is generated, and your buffer is returned back to the application, and the buffer is down, and you can use the buffer, and you can, if you want, you can loop again and requeue the buffer, and again and again. When you've done, you just stop the device, and you release the buffer. So this is a simple view of a source device, generating data without all the other function. This shows that for the user application, all you need to do is submitting empty buffer to the video endpoint of the video source device. Then it's filled, and on the other side, on dequeue, you retrieve the filled buffer with any format which is configured on the endpoint. Here is the same for output device. This time you uncue already filled buffer, and the video output function is done, and when it's done, you retrieve your buffer. This is not really empty buffer, to be honest. This is the same buffer you uncue, but that shows that you can reuse the buffer for whatever you want. Here, this is an example of a more complex device with video processing. So here we convert a buffer. So there is two endpoints. The endpoint in takes your native buffer, I would say, the buffer you want to convert. Then you uncue also on the output endpoint, and you configure the correct format, so the format you expect at the end, if it's supported by the endpoint. So you uncue your video in a RGB format, for example, and on the other side you retrieve a video buffer in a NV12 format, or whatever you want here. And at the end, that allows you to have more complex combination of device and what we can call a pipeline. So here we have three devices. We can say that it's a camera, it's a color space converter, and this is a video output device. So at the end you can capture an image, a frame, push the image to the video color space converter, convert it to a video output or display native format, and push it to the video output device. And all of this without any software memory operation. All of this can take place in hardware if the hardware supports, with DMA and so on. So this is really a kind of zero copy pipeline. There is no software mem copy here. Here, this is an example of a simple capture with a pseudocode for Zephyr application. So the first step is to retrieve the device. It's retrieved like any other device in Zephyr with device get binding. We allocate the buffer, we uncue the buffer, we start the stream, we dequeue the buffer, we do any frame processing or we save the frame, we release the buffer, and we stop. And here we just take a snapshot or something like that. Here this is a pseudocode for continuous double buffer capture. Here the difference is that we allocate two buffers, we uncue these two buffers, then we start, and we dequeue the buffer. When you have a buffer, we do frame processing, but at the same time, that means the other buffer can be used by the hardware. And once we've done with the buffer, we requeue the buffer, and so on forever. So that creates a double buffering video capture. And here, this is a more complex scenario. This is the one we see with a pipeline, where we have a camera, encoder, and output. And here this use the signal, so this is signal driven. We do quite the same as the other code, but we register signal on the different video device endpoint, and then we start the different device. And the while loop here, in one thread, we get all the signal from all the devices. So for example, when we get the camera output signal, we dequeue the buffer, and since we realize a pipeline, we just requeue the buffer in the encoder device. So all of this without any copy of the buffer. And after that, we dequeue the buffer, we recycle it to go into the video. We push that, we retrieve the yeah, maybe there is an error on my support, but yeah, we retrieve all the buffer like that and requeue when necessary. So it is allowed in one thread to accomplish the video pipeline. So I created a test pattern generator, which is a video device. But this is a pure software video device which is not backed by any hardware, so that anyone can test a video source device. So this one just generates some pattern, here a color bar pattern in RGB format, and that can be used for testing, for calibrating device, and for reference, and for people that don't have the hardware. I also added support for, which is in the pull request as well, for the IMX RT1064 EV key. So this is a board which has a parallel port, and we can plug a MTM9 sensor. So this is quite a complex scenario, because on this setup the sensor has two BIOS. One is a parallel BIOS for video data, and one for control, which is I2C for controlling the camera. So I created two video devices, one which is the master video devices, the one the user application will have to deal with it, and another one which is the sensor itself, which is used for control only. So this is kind of a video sub device or video slave device, which is controlled directly by the master device. So that when you set a format here, this is forwarded to the correct video device. And here this is an example of a device tree. So this is a basic definition of the CSI, which is the parallel interface, NXP parallel interface. And then the I2C device, and I link both of these devices with what I call a sensor label in the CSI, so that we can change the sensor label if requested. I think it's time for a demo, if it works. So I created also a basic sample, but also a network sample, which name is TCP server sync sample. This is basically something that retrieves any capture device, retrieve the frame from this device, and push the frame on a TCP socket to the TCP client if any. So I'm going to test that now. So this is on the IMX RT1064 board. I just have an Ethernet cable, and I'm going to plug the power. So here the image is captured via the video API. Oh yeah, that's a bit fuzzy, but I think I can probably change the focus and so on. So the sensor captures the video. It goes through the video API, and then we use the network stack, the Zephyr network stack, to push the data through TCP. So this is, for a microcontroller, this is quite a complex scenario that is quite ready to have with other RTOS, I would say. So that's to show that Zephyr offers a lot of feature, and with that video API, that's offer a lot again. So yeah, so it's all for me. If you have any question.
Checking we weren't messing with whoever's presenting next. I had a couple of questions as I came through. The first was on the video buffers and the single timestamp. I'm conditioned to expect a requested presentation time and an achieved presentation time, because if you don't know the achieved presentation time of an output buffer, you can't retime the vertical sync to match the input.
So what we have currently is that when the buffer is captured, we set the timestamp at the moment the buffer is captured.
Oh, I see, okay. So when you spoke about it, you said it was the requested presentation time.
Yeah.
Not the achieved presentation time.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
But it can be used for, then it can be used for time rendering when we want to display it anyway.
Yeah, okay.
So you have talked about the control IDs and the buffers that you are sending out.
Sorry, I didn't.
So you have talked about the control IDs that will be configuring different parameters for those buffers for the session.
Yeah.
For example, those if you have a dynamic parameter that you want to configure, so how you will ensure that that particular parameter is basically getting applied on a specific buffer? Like, for example, there is a scene change, and you want to generate an IDR or a keyframe. How you ensure that that keyframe is generated with particular buffer?
So the control is not by buffer; it's a control on the whole device. So you have to configure before the device with the GOP size, the interval in which you want to have the.
What I meant to say is, like, when you are specifying a property, can it be dynamically applied on a specific buffer? How you ensure that?
That depends on the driver. If the driver support, you mean when the video function is started, you want to apply a control, like changing keyframe interval or something like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I don't have any driver for that for now, but I assume it's doable. Yeah, it depends on the driver implementation.
Okay.
But
so
if it's possible, I will push to have the support for.
Okay. So there is no support in the API. It's basically meant for the driver.
Sorry.
There is no support in the API, but it is basically meant for the driver to.
Yeah, the API just offers you the interface. So what the driver do inside is up to the driver. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm just curious, at the API level, have you thought about what would change between color spaces, or like RGB to CBCR, or YUV, or RGB24 to RGB565? I assume you're just sort of defining the API, but is there anything in there today to switch between? Like, because most of the displays are going to be probably 565, but maybe the cameras will be 8. Just some efficient mechanism to maybe downsample the images or change the bit depth or things like that.
Yeah, so that's the goal. But you mean in software? You mean?
Yeah.
I'm not sure we do that today in software. I know that
because you're not going to have any. You generally won't have any hardware.
Yes, I think this IMX has a color space converter, as far as I know.
Okay.
And yeah, one next step would be to add a video driver for this color space converter. Okay. We can also create a video software device, a generic color space converter, a generic software device like the test pattern, but to convert in software. But yeah, again, we are on a microcontroller, so.
Yeah, no, I was working on a color science library, so I was asking maybe it's something I can plug in.
Yeah.
I have a bunch of color space conversions and things like that I can maybe see if I can optimize them to
that could be exactly be part of create a software video device for that. Time out. Okay, thank you everyone.